All right. Well, now, Halitics, I'm Hal Ginsberg, and Arlen is busily looking. I guess you're perusing your New York Times to make sure he's up on the articles we're going to discuss. How you doing today, Arlen?
Well, I'm just trying to make sure the paper is right side up. I don't want to read it, if it's up down. It makes it so much more difficult. But Hal, I'm doing all right. The sun is out today. We've had some very cold weather, and it still continues to be very cold. And I imagine it's that way in Maryland also, right?
It is cold here, but usually Vermont is quite a bit chillier, of course, than we get here in the Free State, many hundreds of miles south. Now, you will be enjoying the Thanksgiving feast in Vermont, will you not? I just want to confirm that.
Yes. We're going to be here all the way through the first of the year, I think, because we're planning on going to New York City around just before Christmas with the kids.
And did you tell me there is some snow on the ground, is there not?
There has been. Yeah, Nancy seems to think that it's a little bit colder, a little bit more, snow or whatever for this time of the year than normal. So that I don't know, but I can understand that.
Well, maybe you'll get some ice fishing in. Do you ski at all? Have you ever skied? Is that something you do?
No, I'm strictly a Californian. I don't do any winter sports, although some Californians do, but not me.
Yeah, I knew people from Los Angeles when I was in college who would go to Mammoth to ski, for example. That's not too far, I don't think, from LA. So certainly there is plenty of winter sports if you want them in the Golden State. I miss it. I used to ski. I was a very avid skier in my youth, but my back problems have made it impossible. And when I was living in Monterey, I had thought maybe there'd be an opportunity I'd go out to the Sierras, but it never happened, mainly because, again, of the back problems. They do, even biking now has become more and more challenging for me. All right, 240-242-5646, just a little small talk with Arlen. I'm just trying to move the little bits, the little elements around the screen. Don't forget, click like, click subscribe. We definitely want you to be part of the program, and the best way is to register your support for Halitics by subscribing. There it is. There's the subscription button. Arlen is the thought leader from California. I stepped on you a little bit, Arlen. What's on your mind? What did you want to say?
As far as sports, winter sports, and all that, I don't even surf, so I guess I'm not the athletic type. But
you surf? Is that what you said? You surf? You like a?
I'm not the sporting type guy. I'm not a big athlete, believe it or not. And but Nancy likes to ski. She likes to take our daughter skiing in California and Vermont. And
did you surf? Did you say you surf? I thought you may have said you surf.
I was joking around because at that time it was a big thing when I was, in high school and all that. But no, I just listened to the music of the Beach Boys.
Oh, well, that's the same as the Beach Boys. They weren't surfers either. Apparently, none of them surfed, even though they were very closely associated with the sport. All right, I just put that up there. Did we used to be great? Just want to let people know what we're going to talk about. This was inspired by the article that you can see the headline there in the top left corner of that thumbnail. America's formula for greatness is under threat, by Nick Kristof. And Arlen, I'm not a big fan necessarily of Kristof, certainly not of some of the others that you rely on for articles, including Tom Hartman and Robert Reich. I was actually pretty critical of Robert Reich yesterday on my program, and I even played a clip. I actually created a clip in which I went after Reich pretty aggressively. I got to tell you, when I first saw this article by Kristof, I thought, oh no, there goes Arlen again with another article I got to go after him for. But I did read the article, and while I don't think the most important aspects of American, quote, greatness, unquote, to the extent that we were ever great, are touched on by Kristof, I think it is fair because he's really addressing America's preeminent place in the world as the hegemon and how we may be losing that in part, not in whole, but in part because of Trump's actions accelerating what may be a decline. I thought he actually kind of touched on some really important stuff. So we'll get to that.
Well, I think I've been noticing it ever since, Trump took office the second time. It's just everything is going downhill, economically, culturally, You wanted to show us an article about how they ride on the sidewalk and erasing crosswalks, things like that. It's like Donald Trump wants to take us back at least 50 or 60 years, and the rest of the world is looking at us like this is not the America we used to know. So
240. No,
really
you're.
thing.
It's really upsetting. There's so many different ways, and his abusive treatment of human beings in his orbit mirrors the terrible foreign policy, killing fishermen and then claiming that they're drug traffickers and all manner of outrages that this administration is responsible for.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Arlen, let's start though in the middle. And did we ever used to be great? That's where I sort of take issue. The assumption that once we were great, in some ways we were better for sure, I think, than we are now. I don't think there's any doubt.
I think you could say we were great because people from all over the world want to come and live here, and understandably, because our military is number one, our culture is number one, almost every aspect of life. There's no other country that can compete with us, really. I mean, now, if you're talking about, the kind of life you live here, that's another story. But as far as the big items, show business and, the military and all those kind of things, we are definitely on top, have been on top.
But I mean, I can't argue with that point. I would say that I think the greatest achievements of our country in some ways were when we addressed some of the worst injustices for which our leadership and many people in our country are responsible for. Jim Crow laws, the mistreatment of Black people, obviously addressing that in the 60s forcibly with civil rights, Medicare, the war on poverty, the New Deal by FDR. I think those were some areas where America reached to greatness. I think we always fell short. What I find so problematic about the 60s is just when we were really starting to address the mistreatment of Black people, we were engaged in a terrible war in Vietnam. So I don't think we ever got to be great. Great as a great king, great as super uber powerful like the British Empire in the 19th century or the Roman Empire in the around the Christian era, but not great as reaching some kind of summit of human capability.
Well, yeah, nobody expects us to be perfect, but I don't see any other country that can, stand up to us in most of the important areas of life. And another thing is science, technology, medicine, health, all these things we were making lots of progress, and a lot of money was out there for research and development, from the federal government, and now it's all being taken away, as well as a lot of scientific, progress we made, especially with, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his ilk.
A lot of problems going on, a lot of things making America worse. Whether you ever think we were great, we're certainly less than what we once were. Here's an area where I think I grudgingly, I have to give Trump maybe a little credit. The ceasefire does appear to be continuing. Now, of course, he aggravated the genocide terribly, but at least in this moment, and that's the headline from Al Jazeera, quite amazingly, this is the first time I've gone to Al Jazeera, I think, in memory, Arlen, and the lead story hasn't been about the latest killings in Gaza, the latest violations of the ceasefire by Israel since that was announced. But here you see their actual headline is House to vote on Epstein files release as Trump meets the Saudis, MBS, and I'm not sure who MBS is, some Mohammed bin Salman, who I guess is some crown prince over there or something like that. And they're working on this sale of fighters, right? Fighter jets going over to Saudi Arabia.
I think Saudi Arabia is becoming a very important country. I think a lot of other countries look up to them, and they're trying their best to. They've got so much money, and they're coming over to our country and trying to, get more into the things that we do, and we're going over there and trying to get into their things. Golf tournaments, tennis tournaments that require a lot of money. So, and he supposedly thinks that he can make his country more moderate, more agreeable for women, but then again, you have to think about the fact that he ordered the killing and dismemberment of the Washington Post journalists some years back, and so he's had to overcome that.
Well, the Arab world is really being led now by these autocratic states like Saudi Arabia, as opposed to what you hoped were a little bit more moderate countries in the past, including Egypt under Sadat. So that's a very unfortunate development, probably a result in large part of American action that destabilized what were proto-democracies in the past. Phone number here, by the way, 240-242-5646. But to the extent that Saudi Arabia is really going to pressure Trump to keep Netanyahu from restarting genocide, that is without question a positive. And the UN has voted to approve the Trump plan there, which is to have a multi-nation force, peacekeeping force, including many Muslim countries, Arab countries in Gaza. So I'm very, very cautiously hopeful that there will not be another hell on earth visited on the people of Gaza, but we will see.
And you may remember the last week we were talking about, Gaza's a little bit better, but now it was the West Bank that there was a lot of action and, killing, and Israel was really, sending a lot of offensive weapons over there. So, that area of the world is always going to be unstable. And you could never, feel reassured that things were going to be okay.
Well, certainly as long as we continue to arm Israel, they will be a force for death and destruction. That's something to be very, very nervous about. No question about that. You can see here there is the plan that was approved. And I know Code Pink, some of my friends in Code Pink, and I'm active there, think this was a very, very bad development. I can't say that, even though, as I said yesterday, Arlen, I was hoping, for obviously something very, very different, for some kind of real one-state solution. That doesn't look like there's any chance that will happen, because the United States will not support that. There's not going to be any leverage used to force Israel ever to accept Muslims as full citizens in their country. There does appear to be real political will. I hope this is the case, to agree to some kind of self-determination for the Palestinian people. You can see that headline there. Trump's Gaza peace plan does reference potential Palestinian statehood. And this was a real problem for Netanyahu. He issued a speech condemning it and saying, no, we don't ever want Palestinians to have their own country, to have to have rights. We're totally against that. We'll see if anything really positive comes to fruition.
I don't know if you're familiar with this particular vote, but it was unanimous, except China and Russia, abstained. So it's not like it's unanimous. There's still a lot of problems there.
Well, it was pretty close to unanimous. Even Russia and China didn't vote no. They didn't veto it, which they could have done. And I think the reason they did not is because the Arab world was not opposed to it, because they wanted the killing to end. So I think that was the main reason for that. No real benefit to Russia and China for it. They vetoed it. So hopefully, just hopefully, Arlen, maybe there's a glimmer of peace breaking out. That's what we see. And,
well, we're all hoping for that, or peace in that region, but whether it's realistic to expect that is another matter.
Well, again, I think that the ball is all in the U.S. Court. If we have a president who's committed to holding Israel accountable, who's committed to denying Israel weaponry, committed to denying Israel aid, and is willing to go to Congress and say you have to say no to your AIPAC benefactors, then I think peace is possible.
Well, I don't think any of that's going to happen now.
So you think that AIPAC is just too powerful? You think the Israel lobby is just too powerful to be stopped, to be bucked?
Well, they're certainly very strong, and it's going to be hard to block them. Another thing about Israel is that a lot of it depends. You also have to think about Hamas. Are they going to give up their weapons? Are they going to give up their military might? It's hard for me to imagine that they will. So,
well, they have no military might. They already have pretty much agreed to hand over whatever power they have. They have agreed to that if there's legitimate representatives of the Palestinian people available to them. But I mean, Israel's the sticking point. I think I don't think it's fair to put that on Hamas. I mean, if Israel stops persecuting and oppressing Gaza and starts treating the people there like human beings and rebuilding the country it destroyed, then I think there is some hope.
Yeah, but I don't think that Hamas is going to give up their arms. I haven't seen any indication of it. They've always, stood by that they are the leaders. They're the people that run Gaza and in that whole area. So I just don't see Hamas as an easy,
Well, they're presiding over rubble. I mean, it's pure rubble. And Hamas has repeatedly said has repeatedly signed off on various peace deals. And every time they did, Netanyahu pulled the rug and said, no, no, no. Hamas even said it would give up power. And Trump acknowledged when they didn't immediately give up power as well, there's a vacuum. If they stop exercising authority in Gaza, then there will be just purely anarchy. There'll be nothing because the Israeli military even pulled out of some areas of Gaza. Someone has to have authority there, and if Hamas doesn't, then nobody will.
Yeah, somebody's going to have authority there, and that's this key sticking point. Who is going to have authority? Who is going to decide what's going to happen to Gaza and the Palestinians? That's something that we have to still deal with because it's not unanimous. Let's put it that way.
It has to be the Palestinian people. It has to be the people who live there who make the decisions.
And
for now, though, apparently, the hope is a peacekeeping force, an international force that consists of Egyptians, Jordanians, and many Palestinians will be in charge. And that is the hope. That's something that Israel is dead set against.
Yeah, but it's a great plan. But like you say, Israel's against it. So unless you get everybody to go along with these things, they're just not going to work.
Well, the way you get Israel to go along with it is you say to Netanyahu and you say to Smotrich and you say to Ben-Gvir, if you don't go along with this, then the U.S. Army is going to put itself right between you and Israel, you and Gaza, and you will have no say. That's how you get Israel to go along with it. But that's why I say AIPAC is the problem, because AIPAC will do everything possible to prevent the United States from forcing Israel to do what we should have forced them to do years ago.
Well, we don't know what's going to happen, as far as what Israel's going to do, and nor do we know exactly what Hamas is going to do or the Palestinians. I think the plan of an international tribunal of nations, like you were just talking about, is probably the best bet if both sides will go along with it.
All right, 240-242-5646 if you want to join us. 240-242-5646. I see Edward, and Ari in the chat. Edward writing, look at where Britain, France, and Germany are today. That's the gauge to gauge Trump by. So you're saying we'll be like England, France, or UK, France, and Germany. Well, I don't know. Those countries are pretty nice. France and Germany, they have a lot to recommend themselves. I'm not so sure I would object to living in a country where everyone has health care. We have free college or very close to free college as they do in France. I think it is actually tuition free in Germany. In the UK, some of the schools are cheaper than others, and they're all much cheaper than here. So I'm not sure I would look at UK, France, and Germany as necessarily a problem. Maybe you're not either, Edward. All right. America's formula for greatness is under threat. Let's talk about this, Arlen. You recommended the piece. Why? What is it about this article that you feel makes it relevant in today's world?
Well, like I said, ever since Trump took over, it seems like we are going backwards in just about every important area that we should be, pushing forward with. And of course, that's Donald Trump, and it's always going to be that way. But so we used to be a country that other nations would look up to as far as science, industry, health, and military, all those things. We are, superior to any other country as far as, numbers and power and all those things. But now, with the kind of things that Trump is doing, we're going to be losing a lot of that because we're not going to have people from other countries that will be, helping us. We won't have, we're going to be definitely behind in so many areas, and it'd be almost impossible to catch up. So I just, I worry about this country. I think it's going downhill.
Can we be an admirable country, though, Arlen? Just even, and I think, by the way, Christoph makes the point, before I get into my question, he makes the point that a lot of the decline that we're seeing now, what didn't start under Trump, it may be accelerated by Trump, but really we're looking at trends, for example, our declining education system, the treatment of immigrants. We've been cutting back on immigration long before Trump. I mean, Obama was the great deporter as an example. So is it really fair to put it all on Trump rather than to say these are trends that Trump is not addressing, but rather accelerating?
I would just say that Trump is making all of them worse. All the things that he's doing is making other countries look at us suspiciously and, worry about us, and knowing that we're not going to be able to really help in the peace process with our military, because who knows where Trump is on that. And, as far as how they treat, international students, how they treat the universities, it's horrible that Trump is really seems to be attacking big universities like Harvard and Columbia. So, there's so many different areas that we're not looking ahead. We're rather looking to go back, like I say, 30 or 40 or 50 years.
Is it fair, though, to call us a great nation if we have so many children sleeping under bridges, begging in the streets? I mean, this was all happening long before Trump. We had basically abandoned, at least since Reagan, the war on poverty, for example. I saw one commentator to Christoph's piece claim that the real decline in America began under Reagan, when tax rates on the wealthiest were slashed. Haven't we kind of forsaken any aspirations to greatness, at least since the late 70s or 80s, when we embraced a kind of rapacious, loser take nothing capitalism?
I think we always want to be up there as the leaders in this, the strongest country, but we're not. The actions that we have and the way the government works just don't, make that happen. So, there's so many different aspects to greatness, and certainly lifestyle is not a real strong one for us because there's so much poverty in this country and wealth inequality. So, what we're really the strongest with is military. Nobody's close to us there. And I guess that's probably the biggest.
Yeah, it is. But, military might doesn't lead to better results at home much of the time. I guess you could point to Nazi Germany and say that the Germans were eating better during World War II until the very end compared to the countries that they conquered. But in the end, they too were starving. So here are the three areas that Christoph points to as the elements of American greatness: a commitment to education at every level, resulting in global leadership in science and technology. I believe the answer to almost every question is education. The highest return on long-term investments are often in human capital. Now, I question this a little bit because, at least in America today, we have many people with degrees, some with advanced degrees, who are having real trouble getting work. So education hasn't necessarily been the ticket to an end to want or poverty in today's
Well, there's
America.
also, you have to consider that the Trump administration certainly does not put education near the top of important things to do. They're dismantling the education department and taking away all kinds of programs that would help students and help young people get a higher education, and making and not helping with the cost of going to universities like these other countries we talked about. You often have free universities. In this country, you have to take out loans and you're in debt for a long time.
Yeah, no question. And I agree. Trump has been just an absolute disaster for higher education. And certainly he fears it. I don't think he understands the Enlightenment to the extent he does understand the ideals that our nation's founders relied on. The ideals, not the reality, but to the extent he understands the ideals, I'm sure he fears them. He hates them. He hates the idea of equality, of some kind of universal rights of people, especially economic rights. So, no, this is a real problem. And certainly if you don't want people to demand some kind of justice and equity, then you you destroy their ability to understand how freedom and some type of a decent life came about for most Americans. So we're absolutely seeing that. What do you think, if anything, Democrats or an opposition should do? I mean, Christoph is exposing this. Do you think there's a proper response by the opposition to Trump's actions?
Well, I think the Democrats are doing what they, I think last week proved that the Democrats are starting to make some progress. They won, they pretty much swept all the elections, just by caring about things that the Republicans don't care about, by concentrating on, economics, affordability, and that's going to be of course, it always is the number one area that people look at, when they want to vote. So it's I mean that's where the Democrats have to push the most and show that they care about how the working people are doing, that they're giving them health care and other protections. If they could do that, they could do well in the midterms, even though they're a year away.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think what Democrats need to do is talk about how they will impose, or if they're elected, to the extent they are, they have to champion legislation that will clearly improve the quality of life for poor, struggling, and working people. I've never stopped saying that. That's always what I'm going to say, and I'm going to keep saying it. That's one of the reasons I have a bit of a problem with this particular element that Christoph discusses. I do think that a market economy is essential. I really do. There are people who are communists and stuff, and we get into arguments. I'll get into arguments with them because I think the market should determine production, right? I mean, but you want lots and lots of little producers, not oligopolies and monopolies. And right now, what we have in America and around the world are oligopolies and monopolies. So I don't know where to go with this. You talk about it, the free trade and free markets element.
Well, I think just about every country has a mixture of several different kinds of economics. I mean, Europe, the United States, we have a lot of socialist programs, whether we want to admit it or not. And at the same time, there's certainly a lot of capitalism out there, and certainly in this country, we don't try to hold anybody back when it comes from wealth. I mean, Elon Musk. I mean, he's been offered $1 trillion. That's absurd. That's more than entire half of our country. And so that part's going to have to be pulled in. I think you have to, have at least some equality, because this is the worst it's ever been.
Right, and I don't think Christoph addresses that to the degree I think he should, because a society just cannot survive, or certainly be great. Maybe it can survive. You can have a feudal society with dukes and barons who own everything, but it's not going to be great. But he makes a good point here. He talks about corruption. He mentions the tariffs. Tariffs are the highest since the 30s. The 30s, we had a different economy. We were a net exporter, and tariffs were a problem for us. I think now tariffs are pretty critical for our working people. But he also mentioned, so I disagree with Christoph's, I guess, disdainful attitude towards tariffs. That's how I feel. You have a different view on that, Arlen. But I do 100% agree that this is an incredibly corrupt president. He does look at the office as a way for him to enrich himself and his family. And that's terrible. It's awful.
I don't see how people could even tolerate it. I mean, just everything you hear about, he's making billions of dollars for his family. There's never been a president like that. All of them before have tried to, avoid things like that, and, the emolument clause and all that. But Trump has no compunctions about just going ahead and taking advantage of every possible way to make money and to put his name and his companies out there in different countries.
I mean, he's certainly the least shame. He certainly has no shame about it. He's completely shameless.
Right.
I would point out that you can look at examples, I think, of corruption in the Obama administration. He did open up the Arctic to drilling. He did allow offshore drilling. And as soon as he left office, he did go give hundreds, many $100,000 speeches to the Carlyle Group, which profited from the policies that Obama, pushed. We can certainly see some of the ways that the Clinton Global Initiative's clients benefited from Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. But I would agree, no one has been nearly as obviously corrupt as Trump, and it's awful. I mean, there's no excuse.
No, it just keeps going on and keeps getting worse. And you have all this talk about cryptocurrency and all that. I mean, we may change our entire monetary system. If it helps him, he'll work to make that happen.
It's bad, Arlen. Here's where Christoph talks about immigration. And I agree with this too. We definitely, the abusive treatment of immigrants is another terrible crime by this administration. Immigration, the absorption of some of the brightest minds from around the world. My dad, an Armenian refugee, arrived in U.S. in 1952, and he tells this nice story. His landlady returned his rent, saying, "I can't take money from a refugee." So again, it was a different time. We had just won World War II. There was a feeling that we have to help those around the world who are in peril. We don't live in those times anymore.
No, and it's such a difference when we really have to take advantage of immigration, because Christoph points out that about half of the companies on the Fortune 500 are started with immigrants and their families. So we've gotten so much from intelligent people. Talented people from all countries, and to suddenly stop that is not going to be good for, all of us.
Yeah. 100%. I do always, note that the problem for American labor is that when you increase the supply of workers in this country who are immigrants, then you reduce the the price that the worker can charge, i.e. their wages, and that we need to get a grasp onto. And that is the failure of the Democrats to address that, I think, in 2024 was a big reason that Harris lost. I mean, there was a real sense, I don't know how true it is. I mean, there's no question we had stagnant wages, living standards were flat or perhaps even dropping because of inflation. I don't know that a direct connection to a somewhat lax border policy is responsible. And in fact, Biden's border policy wasn't that lax. He deported millions. But certainly the perception was that people were just walking across the Rio Grande and nobody said boo about it. Regardless, declining or stagnant wages real wages are a big factor here. So again, Democrats need to figure out how they can take on the plutocrats and make life better for working people if they want to defeat Trump and the Trumpism.
Well, first of all, they should start by getting rid of their leaders and having some stronger, more powerful leaders. You know, Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, they have to go. So that'll be a big start. But I sort of get the impression that the Trump administration doesn't understand economics. They don't know how to make things better, how to, cut prices down on so many things. I think they're just, swinging around with their baseball bat, but not sure where to hit. So, and certainly Trump doesn't, is not an educated person, so he's not going to be able to
he's
help.
Educated. I don't know that he's educated, but he's very limited, shall we say, in terms of his intellect to kind of the bottom line, to balance sheets and, cash flow statements rather than how do we actually make things better, right? I mean, he can probably figure out ways to goose the bottom line for a few years, but not ultimately grow a business to a point where everyone is benefiting from it. That's not who Trump is. He's always benefited from destruction, from properties going bankrupt and the like. So yeah, no, he is not. He's a terrible, terrible president. He's an awful president.
And not only that, Hal, you have to look at who he really cares about. He cares about the people at the top, the billionaires, the corporate heads. He seems to have no compassion at all, or doesn't care a bit about people who are struggling in this country. Working people and poor people. He doesn't seem to want to help them.
Yeah, sorry about that. We lost Arlen for just a sec. Just doing a quick test here. I don't even think, to be fair to Trump, I don't think it's that he really likes the billionaires very much either. It's just he can use them, right? He's very practical. He can get something from them. And maybe he has some grudging respect for money because he has a lot of money, so he respects himself, even though, again, this is a guy who was born on third base, thinks he had a home run. All right, 240-242-5646. Before we are going to talk about Goldberg, but did we miss something in the Christoph piece that you feel was important?
Oops. Well, let's see. He talked about immigration and he talked about economics, and so I think we covered it. I'm sure there's many areas that our greatness is under threat, and I think there's no question about that. But he covered a lot of the major ones.
All right, I do want to talk about the MAGA crack up to the extent there is one, and I think there is one. This is a Michelle Goldberg piece in the New York Times, as well as Ezra Klein and Nick Fuentes. But before we get there, this article, Arlen, really grabbed my attention. Also covered by the New York Times, and we're going to play a news clip here from Lubbock, Texas. I have never been to Lubbock. I have been to Texas, but Lubbock's an extremely large state, and Lubbock there in the northern, sort of northwestern kind of panhandle area. I've never been to, but maybe Lubbock isn't in the maybe it's Amarillo that's in the panhandle. Maybe Lubbock's just below it. I'm not sure. This is the home of Buddy Holly, one of my all-time fave artists. Poor Buddy's gonna he's gonna lose a little, I guess. I don't know what his impact will be. The visual of Buddy will be lost a little bit. Here we go.
At today's meeting, city leaders also revealed a new state law will change the streets of Lubbock. TxDOT provided clarification on Lubbock's creative crosswalks. Traffic officials notified the city of Lubbock the iconic Buddy Holly crosswalks.
So I'm going to stop it there for a sec so you can see there's the Buddy Holly glasses. He had those sort of nerdy glasses he wore. And so, of course, Lubbock paying homage to their favorite son, one of the all-time great rockers, having those in the crosswalk. But apparently you can't have any art now. It's not just political statements like Black Lives Matter, which is what I think Trump was really going after. Their new law says you can't even have this kind of art. And I don't get that, Arlen. Do you want to explain? You have any idea why that is? And wait, hold on before we play the rest of the clip, and then I'm billboarding my question.
These were art installations and not considered a political, religious, or commercial message. They were safe. Then TxDOT notified the city on the 5th that that wasn't the case. Those crosswalks must now be removed, or a plan for removal must be submitted by December 5th. If city leaders stall on this, federal and state funding could be withheld from the city.
Wow, you got any, does that make any sense to you, Arlen?
Well, I sort of, in the fact that I think Trump doesn't want anything that's against his ideas to be in public. And so this is one way to ensure that. I mean, I think in Monterey, we had this very colorful crosswalk on Alvarado, and, it was really beautiful. And they said, no, can't have that because it looks too much like something that the LGBT community would be in favor of. So I think he's just, looking to protect us from, the people who don't agree with him.
I was wondering about that Walk of Fame. The Walk of Fame on the sidewalks of Hollywood where you have all the stars. That seems to me to kind of not jibe with this latest directive, but it's not in the street, right? It's on a sidewalk. Didn't they say sidewalks too, though? You can't have them on sidewalks either.
Yeah, but I think the difference is in the Hollywood Walk of Fame, there are plaques in the ground. They're not painted. So maybe that has something to do with it. But, I think Trump just wants the world to be the way he would like it to be, especially what he remembers when he was younger and, when white people had more power. And, I think that's the kind of world that he wants. And this is one way to get it. I mean, it's also like going into the Smithsonian and taking out things that have to do with slavery and Black people and all those
global
things.
Climate change too.
Yeah, they're just trying to, control the way people are educated and thinking.
Looking at the AI, answer to the question of what has to be removed, and AI is saying the road safety is impacted by distracting or political messages on crosswalks and intersections. So I guess the Walk of Fame being on a sidewalk wouldn't count anyway. So I guess that's why there's not an issue. And like you said, it's not really, well, is it distracting? A distracting message? I don't know. I guess that depends.
No, I don't think it has anything to do with those kind of things to do with safety and all that. It's just about what people see and what kind of ideas they're exposed to, and that's the important thing.
Well, how does the Buddy Holly glasses? They don't really, is this just kind of a unintended consequence of the law? In other words, probably Trump and Abbott, the governor, don't care about those, but still, it's kind of sort of falls under the rules, so they're going to ban them anyway, ban the glasses anyway from the sidewalk, from the crosswalk.
Well, it probably has to do with the fact that, if you do it one place, you got to do it in the other place. So, they want to make it, totally the way it is in the entire country. And then there's no dispute, I guess. Very sad because,
I could see if I was in Lubbock and I was driving across one of those crosswalks, I would definitely want to stop and look at those. I mean, I think it could be, I can see why there would be some distraction. I don't know that they've ever done a study to see if there are more accidents, more collisions, or traffic is slowed. It looked like a pretty unimportant intersection. But, look, it's Buddy Holly. You can't take those glasses out of that crosswalk. Yeah. This is really, really upsetting to me. This is
I'm quite sure it has
terrible.
Nothing to do with safety and distractions and things like that. It's all about ideas. You don't want to have those kind of ideas in this country when we should be celebrating, old stuff and, Confederate generals maybe, but certainly not, modern cultural figures.
But Arlen, this story must have warmed the cockles of your heart. Michelle Goldberg here, the MAGA crack up might finally be here. I think is she just wishful thinking, or is there something to this?
I think there's something to this. Look at some of the people that are starting to break with the MAGA movement. Like. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, and there's some cracks because I think people more and more are seeing that Trump really is not quite the person that they'd hoped he would be, and he's got a lot of faults, and maybe they're protecting themselves from the next election. There's just not the unanimous thinking that there was maybe a few months ago. And it was reflected in the elections last week where the Democrats did so well.
I agree. I think that's exactly right. And seeing, Thomas Massey was always a wild card. He was always a very independent Republican. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, not nearly as much. And she's really taken him on. And by the way, not just on Epstein, although that's where Goldberg chooses to focus, but also on Israel, which perhaps is an even bigger sticking point for Trump. I'm not really sure about that.
Even economic issues I heard her talk about. So she's really taken a break from a lot of his thoughts and ideas. I don't know where she's going to end up because he really condemned her, strongly yesterday. So
apparently she's getting a lot of flack from MAGA people. They're sending pizzas to her house, and I don't know if she's gotten direct threats online. I think she may have said that. I don't. It's very, very upsetting, and I give her a lot of credit. She said she's sorry for some of the rhetoric she used in the past. That she was too. She was too willing to use inflammatory language, and she's sorry she did that. So, I give her a lot of credit actually for her willingness to break with the Republicans. And it's not easy to do, and I do not, unlike the very, I think, ungracious AOC, attribute this purely to the fact that she didn't get support for her run for governor in Georgia.
Well, I think in the case of Marjorie Taylor Greene, it seems like she's starting to think for the first time. Before it was just an automatic, reaction to something that, the MAGA people feel. But, she's like hopefully thinking about the way she's acted before and talked before. And maybe we'll see a change. I don't know what's going to happen with her.
There's certainly been there have been a number of Democrats who seem unwilling to give her any credit. I mentioned AOC. I saw a podcaster who said that something to the effect of she's not to be trusted. You can't I think it was, can a person like Marjorie Taylor Greene ever rehabilitate herself? And I respond, I said, can Kamala be trusted? Can Hillary be trusted? I think this attitude that was shown in that piece was incredibly misguided. Although I think the reason for it, I guess, isn't misguided. The reason for it is Marjorie Taylor Greene is actually somewhat of a populist, and she's against our support for Israel. She is now, as you pointed out, coming around on some pretty important populist economic policies, and that is not what elites in either party want. That is not what the billionaire class that controls both parties wants.
And the biggest thing for her, of course, is getting the Epstein files out. Because Trump was so strong about that, and he made it, really, really important. He took Lauren Boebert into the Situation Room to try to get her to change her vote. But I think there's too many people now that that realize that, we have to see what's in those Epstein reports to really know what we're talking about, because nobody really knows for sure how deep it goes.
Goldberg makes a really good point here that the economic malaise that continues and perhaps has worsened under Trump is definitely a drag for him. The Republican Congress members have to worry about their own reelections, and breaking with Trump may make some sense for them, or make a lot of sense, at least a partial break. They're in a, kind of between a cleft stick now because the Democrats did so well in the off-year elections. What kind of an end game do you see here, Arlen? Do you think the Democrats now, are you starting to think there's, the odds are they will retake Congress?
I think they have an awfully strong, case to be made. Yeah, I think they could do that. But it's going to take some time. But I think what Trump is offering is, many people are seeing, just isn't going to work, because he was, promising that prices were going to go down, and he's going to make peace all over the world, and all of a sudden his promises aren't coming true. And I think especially in the area of affordability, when people see that inflation is really hurting their pocketbook, that's probably going to be the biggest thing of all.
Yeah. Would you now, I said yesterday in my program I wanted Democrats to, I argued against, I don't know if you've read the Reich piece where he says that Democrats are undisciplined. And I argue they are disciplined, but I want to see them, they're disciplined in certain ways. But I want them to be disciplined on an economic message. I want them to be all in favor of Medicare for all. I want them to all be in favor of higher taxes on the wealthy. I think the social and cultural issues, that plenty of room, big tent, pro-trans, you're anti-trans, you're pro-reparations, you're anti-reparations. That's okay. But when it comes to broad-based economic programs that benefit the American public and that take on the plutocrats, that should be the Democratic message. Do you think that would work even in this Tennessee district that Trump won by 22 points, which I don't know anything about?
Well, I'm like you, Hal. I'd like to see the Democrats, be united on these kind of issues, health care and food stamps and all those kind of things that benefit people who aren't rich. And if they could get everybody on board to do that, then that'll increase their success.
Can they get everyone on board, given how much these Congress members are dependent on and look to the billionaire class for support?
Yeah, that's a good question. We just don't know.
240-242-5646. Hey, Splash. I see Splash in the chat. Great to see you there as well. I thought this was a really interesting quote, and one that makes a lot of sense to me, especially in light of recent developments involving Trump, where one of his, apparently a MAGA supporter, Tricia Hope, a Republican who went to who was at Trump's rally on January 6th. I assume they mean the January 6th rally back in 2021, I was going to say 20, but in 21. So she was there when he tried to, overturn the Democratic election, Democrat with a small d. She's now beginning to find him repulsive. Scott Moorfield says Trump's posts are cruel in a way that should make any human with basic empathy question what kind of a human being he is. So I agree with both of those comments. Again, what, if anything, how can Democrats take advantage of this?
Well, I think they have to keep pointing it out when Trump talks about crime and all that. We just have to show pictures that people already have seen of, all the devastation and rioting that took place in the Capitol, and all the police that were hurt, injured, and, ended up dying several days afterwards. I mean, those kind of things are just so obvious. It shouldn't be hard to show. And in fact, I heard something today, I think, that some of the ones that who were got arrested during January 6th are now going to sue the government for, arresting them. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair, but I think a better course would be also for Democrats to, again, highlight the ways Trump's policies have hurt his base, right? Because attacking Trump's base, which is what you're doing if you go after the January 6th people, isn't really going to win them over. But pointing out how his policies are hurting his base and how you have better policies that will make life improve for them, I think is the way to reach them.
Well, yeah, and you're starting to see some success in that area because his poll ratings, his approval ratings are definitely starting to go down. People are noticing. I mean, not enough. We'd like to see more, but I think a lot of particularly independents and people that are quite strong MAGA supporters, are realizing that he's not doing well. He's not helping the country,
and they're afraid for themselves. Those SNAP cuts are going to hurt them. The cuts to Obamacare are going to hurt them, and that's where I think Democrats really need to focus. They don't like the billions and billions going to Israel. That's clearly a big problem on the right. And again, Democrats are not in a good position, though, unfortunately, to take advantage of that because they haven't been good on that issue either.
People also are aware of how much money is going to the top. The Democrats keep pointing that out, which is true. That the top richest people got the best tax breaks, and you can't hide that. It's there.
Okay, here is Trump being particularly repulsive. This is a press conference on Air Force One, so I'll play this clip for you.
Sir, yeah, if there's something incriminating in the file, sir, why not act quiet?
So he calls a woman reporter Piggy because she's asking him about the Epstein files. He doesn't want to talk about it. So Piggy. I mean, it's just really disgusting. I'll play it one more time because it's really sort of hard to catch. But the New York Post, to its credit, the New York Post is obviously a big pro-Trump media outlet. For whatever reason, decided it was going to share this.
Sir, yeah, if there's something incriminating in the file, sir, why not act quiet?
He's so mean. You can see that what an ass he is. Democrats have to model better behavior. They need to point this out. They need to also take on, and I think they are, because look, probably Clinton's in those files, and I think both Clintons maybe, I'm not sure, maybe Hillary isn't, I'm not sure, but they have to be better than they've been. And I'm not saying I fear they won't be. So even if they win the midterms, even if they're president in 28 as a Democrat, if they don't make America better for working people, we're just going to be on the same teeter-totter where we'll get another Republican who's as bad or worse than Trump.
Yeah, this country has a lot of healing to do and a lot of improving to do. There's no question about that. But I think, people are starting. I think the reason that Trump was able to say the things you just showed was because he's been able to get away with it for the last 10, 12 years or whatever. No one's really, done anything against him. So, he feels he can do whatever he wants. And so far, he's been able to do that.
I think working people have just been desperate for someone to take their problems seriously. Trump did appear to do that, but his, quote, solutions, unquote, have not addressed their underlying economic insecurity. Sure. Democrats need to do that. Will they? Probably. All right, here is Ezra Klein in the new pages of the New York Times taking on I don't even know if Fuentes is MAGA. I guess he's Groyper. He calls his followers Groyper. Yeah. They're pretty hard right America Firsters. What is the concern here, Arlen, that Klein expresses, and what is your concern about this I guess aspect of the right wing?
Well, There was the news story just a couple of weeks ago about a Republican group that has just been spouting off all these, evil, racist, anti-Semitic things, and nobody's even saying, "Oh no, we shouldn't do that." They just keep on doing it. So there's a lot of emphasis on going to the extreme and being somewhat racist and being Christian nationalist. These things people are starting to think about, and obviously some people like that. So I hope at least the Democrats will point out when these things happen and show that this is really unacceptable.
Fuentes is a pretty repulsive, despicable person. I don't have the clips. I don't really want to play them, but he said things that are definitely worse than what Charlie Kirk said on a bad day. He has expressed, I don't know, I feel like he questioned the Holocaust. I think what he said is it wasn't as bad as people think, among other choice quotes. I personally, and I mentioned this, am far less concerned right now for Jews than about what the Jewish state is doing. I think that's the bigger risk. But on that exact kind of line, what I heard Katie Halper say, and I thought it was a very good point, is, and she's Jewish, is she doesn't want to center Jews and Jewish fears because we're not the victims right now. The victims are the Palestinian people. The victims are poor people around the world, and Jews don't really fall into those categories. So she doesn't want to center us. But she said, if you are concerned about Jews, you have to understand that someone like a Fuentes, because of Israel's actions, actually is getting a lot of support that he might not otherwise get. In other words, people look at what Israel's doing and they're so upset and so angry, especially when people like Netanyahu claim that if you criticize Israel, or Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL says if you criticize Israel, you're an anti-Semite, that makes people more inclined to follow a person like Fuentes. Is that a fair point by Halper? And how should we respond to a person like Fuentes?
What you're saying, is probably true, but I think the main thing is that it's hate speech, and the last thing we need in this country is hate speech. People, calling out against minority groups, and including Jews, and anybody. I just think it's not something that really helps us, keep us together as Americans. That's for sure. And the more you divide, the better it is for the MAGA movement and people like Trump. And let's not forget one thing too. Trump invited Nick Fuentes to lunch. So,
but Fuentes has been very critical of Trump. Fuentes has said that Trump is not an America firster, and that Trump the MAGA movement is no longer a thing because of Trump.
Well, I don't really care that much what Fuentes says, because I think in years past, he wouldn't even be talked about or considered. The fact that he is, and what he says matters to some people, I think tells you a lot about where we are as a country, and all the hate that has come to the forefront in, the last few years.
Oh, I don't disagree. We are in a very, very bad place. And I implore Democrats and Democratic leaders to center all poor, struggling, working people and to promote policies that will make their lives better. Because the anger, the hate comes from such often, not always, often resentment, insecurity, fear. And if people aren't afraid that they won't have a place to live, or aren't afraid that their job's going to be taken and they'll have nothing, they are, I think, far less likely. Doesn't mean they won't follow. We have lots of anger inside of us and lots of resentment that doesn't stem from economic fear, but much of it does. And this seems to me the way you address it.
Yeah, I think it's easy to divide Americans, between, races and jobs and this and that. But if everybody is suffering from inflation, at least, except for the very rich, of course, I think that's one way to unite people. And if the Democrats get a hold of that, idea that we're just paying too much and this country is no longer affordable, then they will make progress. And I certainly hope that Democratic leaders could point that out and, push their people to do that, to talk about that.
Yeah, I want to just correct something I said, Arlen, because I'm looking at this article here from the AP that's Dateline yesterday. And apparently Fuentes isn't that critical of Trump, even though Fuentes has criticized the pro-Israel policy that Trump has pursued and claimed that Trump is no longer America first. He's still trying to keep feet in both the pro-Trump, the MAGA world, as well as to the right of the MAGA world, or at least to the America First side. So again, these are scary people. They're bad people. But Fuentes has a point that our support for Israel is bad for our country. And I think the left needs to acknowledge that.
Well, yeah, you're right about that. But there's a lot of other better people who talk about how bad Israel is doing than, somebody like Fuentes, who wouldn't like anything about Jewish people.
Well, who on the left is saying this, Arlen, besides me? I mean, seriously, who do you read? I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm curious because it upsets me that I feel that my views. I mean, there are other YouTubers for sure, right? I mentioned Katie Halper. I mentioned these are people you may not be as familiar with, Brianna Joy Gray, but in corporate news, the pro-Israel position seems pretty much supreme, is it not?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. And it is sad that the Democratic Party hasn't pushed back hard enough. But I think the progressive wing of the Democratic Party condemns what Israel is doing, what Netanyahu is doing, the AOCs, the Mondani and Bernie Sanders and so on. I think there are, others, but yeah, not enough. And there should be more condemnation of what Israel is doing, and it's a shame that it hasn't been that way.
Arlen, we are past the hour. I didn't realize it. We got a lot in today. Anything that we missed? Anything you want to elucidate? Or shall we put this off until next week? Are you going to be available next week before Thanksgiving? I will be, and then I'll be off the rest of the week after Tuesday next week.
I may not be able to do it next week, but I do want to say, I think, what you're talking about. I forgot what you were talking about. I know the biggest issue, I think right now, the biggest news right now is, of course, the Epstein files. And, that's going to be big changes, I think, in a lot of ways in how people react to it and, whose name is in it and, how far Donald Trump is into it. We'll be finding that out this week, I think, because this is the week that the files are coming out. Now, I don't trust where they've been. They've been in the Justice Department, and who knows what they're going to, be like when they're finally let out of the Justice Department. But hopefully, we'll know things for sure.
Well, some of the documents released, some of the emails do make Trump look really bad, especially debunking his claim that he wasn't close to Epstein. It seems clear they were very close.
Yeah. There's a lot of terrible things in there that they've said about him so far, but it could be a lot worse.
Well, that is true. And I'll just say one last point. I made this last week, but I'll repeat it for you, Arlen, because I know you and I, too, have expressed concern about a possible third Trump term. I think, if nothing else, his inclusion in the Epstein files, his obvious complicity, to the extent that can be really clearly shown, and seems to already have been shown to a degree, will make it much, much less likely that Republicans would support him if he tries to subvert the Constitution and stay in office.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine seeing him running for president again. It just, with his age and his problems, I just don't see that happening. I think J.D. Vance is the one we have to worry about in the future.
Are you as worried? But last question. Do you find him as and I don't really know that much about J.D. Vance, but people who I know and respect find him very objectionable. Do you find him as objectionable as Trump?
Oh, he is very objectionable. He has a lot of ideas that are pretty extreme, and I think in general he's not very popular. I don't think his poll numbers are very good, and so that may benefit the Democrats. But anyway, that's still a long way away.
All right, I want to thank Arlen so much for joining me. That is going to do it for this edition of Halitics. I am sorry that Arlen, it appears, will not be joining us next week, but I'm sure we'll get him back 2 weeks from today. And thank you so much for being part of Halitics.